It's currently January, days are pretty short, and opportunities for outdoor adventures have been pretty slim. I figured I would fill the gap by answering the age-old question, how do you even get into mountaineering? By dipping into the archive of some of the old mountains and providing a little bit of lore of how I ended up to where I am now. So first, I'm going to go back to where it all started. This is how to climb Mount Hood. Mount Hood, the tallest mountain in Oregon, makes a strong case for being the most beautiful mountain in the world. It dominates the Portland skyline with a perfect volcanic cone that makes it stand out amongst even its taller neighbors. At just over 11,000 feet, its relatively low altitude and proximity to populated areas makes it a strong choice for aspiring mountaineers looking to have their first big mountain experience. This has a catch-22 because on one hand, it has a lot of accessibility and access to resources. But on the other hand, it is a serious mountain that has a lot of moods, ranging from excellent beginner mountaineering to a serious ice climbing excursion. That being said, would-be mountaineers need to take extreme care to pay attention to the conditions in any given year and make informed decisions. I'll get into that a little bit later. I became particularly fond of the Pacific Northwest volcanoes during some travels in 2017, and over the following year, I made it my goal to put together a team who wanted to get out there and have our first real climbing experience. That leads me right into my first topic. What are the requirements to have a safe and successful climb on Mount Hood or equivalent? The first thing you have to recognize is that a climb like this is not a hike. There's no trail to the top. You need a specialized set of gear and skills in order to be safe, as well as knowledge of any number of different hazards that could come up. Mount Hood specifically is almost always done as a single day climb, which saves you a lot of weight and effort putting together backpacking gear, tents, sleeping bags, everything like that. But there is a very specific set of gear that is absolutely mandatory when doing a climb like this. First things first, helmet. Helmet's important to have in any class 3 or above climb, anytime you're involving snow, consider this mandatory gear for anything like this. Secondly, you're going to need all of your sharp objects that'll keep you stuck to the snow. First thing, ice axe. Chances are you wouldn't have one, but you can find them at any number of outdoor stores. Straight shaft is what you want for a traditional mountaineering experience. If your goal is ice climbing, they're going to look entirely different. Secondly, and just as important, are going to be your crampons. These also come in standard mountaineering varieties as well as more technical climbs. You can get a very basic kind right here. When you choose a boot to put them on, keep in mind you probably aren't going to use just a standard pair of hiking boots. You're looking for a certain rigidity of the sole to make them compatible. And also keep in mind that the attachment points on each side are going to vary. So just make sure that you have a boot that's compatible with the specific crampon that you buy. If you're traveling on a budget, I strongly recommend not to go cheap on safety gear. It's designed to save your life. You want the best options available to stay safe on a climb like this. But what's more important than the type of gear you have is knowing how to use that gear. You would not want to be showing up on Mount Hood with all of your gear fresh out of the box trying to use it for the first time. There are a couple of ways to get around this. I never really recommend hiring a guide, but if you hire someone, they'll know exactly how to use everything and be able to work with you. If not, and my preferred option is to just find a place and get out and practice. Trial and error, figure out what works for you, and make some mistakes beforehand. For the team and I, this meant getting out to the questionably named St. Mary's Glacier in Colorado's Front Range to practice all of the required skills. This is, most importantly, ice axe self-arrest, but also maneuvering in crampons. We messed around with rope skills, which is not something I specifically recommend for this climb, but is an option, especially if you have much less experienced members of the team. Once you've taken all of these steps and you're ready to give it a try, last thing you need to think about is permits. And back in 2018, when we climbed, it was free self-issue permits at the trailhead. That has since changed. Now every member of the party needs to go onto recreation.gov and pay $20 to get a 3-day summit pass. That's become a pretty standard thing around these volcanoes, and it's just something we have to deal with. But once you've considered gear, practice, and permits, then you're ready to go. The last thing you'll end up doing is choosing the route by which you want to climb the mountain. On Mount Hood, this is relatively simple because just about all roads will take you to the south side routes. There are exceptions to this, North Side Glacier routes and the dreaded Cooper Spur, that tend to be fairly advanced and should be approached with extreme caution. Even on the south side, all of the routes start just about the same. You follow the line of the ski lift up the first few thousand feet, and then things start to diverge from there. If you go left, you can cut over to the Luthul Kalur. To the right, the Y East route. Both good routes for the climber looking to step things up a little bit. If you continue straight up, then you end up in the crater. From the Hogsback there, routes diverge even more. From here, I don't necessarily think I can give a great recommendation, just because conditions change so much year to year. Normally, you have two options. If you continue straight, you can reach the notoriously icy and steep Pearly Gates, which have actually been the best option in recent years. Or traditionally, if you align left off of the Hogsback, you can reach the old chute. In very recent times, I've heard of other chutes opening up and becoming more ice climbing experiences. But the best thing you can do is check the conditions of your given year and take the best option based on the conditions at the time. It's also important to recognize the fact that season matters quite a bit when choosing when to climb. Really, your window for Mount Hood is going to be about April to the first half of June. It can be extended a little bit further in a really high snow year. But then when you want to go is going to change quite a bit based on the preceding season. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to head all the way back to May 2nd, 2018. I'm going to give a play-by-play of our climbing day, what to expect, what we learned. Keep in mind that everyone's experience changes a little bit, but this is a fairly decent example of what you might expect when you decide to take on the mountain. Perhaps the most shocking thing about a climb like this is just how early you have to get up. I'm not talking 4 or 5 a.m. We woke up at 1 a.m. and tried to be climbing within the hour. We were actually among the later groups to climb the mountain. It's a jarring experience, but as you climb more and more, it becomes a necessity because you want to climb when the snow conditions are favorable for traction. Things get slippery when there's a lot of sun on the mountain, so it's important that you're on and off the mountain at a decent time. Given that early start, you want to set yourself up so you don't have to go through all these steps in order to get to the trailhead just to get started. We decided to camp in a rental RV in the overflow parking of the Timberline Lodge, which is the start to all these climbs. It's also one of the most famous ski resorts in Oregon and served as the exterior shots for the hotel in the movie The Shining. Regardless of how you start, it's totally conceivable that you'll be on snow from the second you get off the parking lot all the way up to the summit. Fortunately, the start is relatively forgiving terrain. You follow the ski lift line up to the terminus at the Palmer Lift, and it's not that steep. Here's kind of your chance to get a feel for your gear, get into the rhythm of things. It's also when you start to realize that you're on a volcano. Pretty soon you start smelling the sulfur. This accounts for about the first few hours of your climb. Once you get to the Palmer Lift, that's kind of that last point where you have a little bit of shelter, maybe a break from the wind. It's really cold a lot of the time up there. And what you don't necessarily think about is that when you start at 1 a.m., it'll proceed to get colder through the night, both because of just the nature of how the temperature changes through the night, but also you're gaining elevation. So until the sun comes up, it just keeps getting colder and colder. Rookie mistakes start to hit really hard up here. They say that cotton kills because when you sweat, it loses all of its insulation. And me, without a lot of experience, decided that my main insulating layer was going to be a Hanes 100% cotton hoodie. So it was hard to get warm, and the little bit of solace we could get inside the Palmer ski lift before continuing was huge. There's an ongoing joke that we have among the group that we're still all frozen up there, and that everything that happened after is just this collective dream that we're in. Final shelter at the Palmer lift is kind of the point where you have to evaluate things. Are you feeling good? Do you want to keep going? And all of those things. If the answer is yes, then you continue on into ungroomed terrain. And it gets noticeably steeper from there to the point where it's a little bit eye-opening if you don't have a lot of experience on mountains. It may not be more than 30 degrees most of the time, but 30 degrees feels steep, especially knowing that if you slip, you got a long way to go and you don't necessarily stop unless you're experienced with that ice axe. This continues for another few thousand feet. It's fairly monotonous, but it takes you all the way up to the crater, and that's where the real fun begins. The crater of Mount Hood is a particularly inhospitable place. It's steep in most directions, big ice walls, and these doors to hell where it drops off through the snow into the volcano's steam beds. At this point, we decided we were going to rope up. A decision that, although not catastrophic, I don't necessarily stand by. None of us were particularly experienced with rope skills, and group self-arrest is one of those things that can go well, but it could also not go very well. Also noticing that most people on the mountain were not roping up should have been a red flag for us, but we proceeded anyway. From here, route finding is really easy because there's a very distinct line that you follow. There's sort of the saddle in between two slopes that they call the Hogsback. And the Hogsback has a very distinct bergschrund, the area where the two glaciers are separating. And it's the only really recognizable crevasse you can see on the route. Depending on time of year, you either go right over the top of it if there's snow bridges or weave around it. We were pretty early, so we kind of just continued up that line towards the pearly gates. We were pretty sure that the pearly gates were the right option given the situation because I don't think a single team that day went over to the old chute or really any of the other options at all. The pearly gates are a bit surreal because it's a very narrow section, only enough space to really get one person through at a time. So in high traffic times, you're waiting for somebody to come up or somebody to come down, and you have to kind of wait for your turn. Also, big ice walls line the sides, and it steepens to probably about 45 degrees, which is very steep from mountaineering standards. And despite the steepness, it never really feels sketchy because you're so enclosed, you don't get the sense that you're really high up or in immediate danger. It's also not a very long section, a few hundred feet, and then it starts to level back out. And then pretty soon, you're at the summit. It's the last major obstacle you need to get through before you've accomplished it. At that point, it was probably right around 10 a.m., which would have meant 9 hours of climbing. And there's only so much sleep you can get when you try and force yourself into bed at 6 or 7 p.m., not really tired. So you're always sleep deprived, but the blast of adrenaline is sort of keeping you going. As you kind of come up and over, you're greeted directly by the summit. And it's not a very big summit, but you can see hundreds of miles in all directions, north to Adams and Rainier, south to Jefferson and Three Sisters. It's an incredible experience. And on a good day, everything is just so blue and green. And it's an incredible summit and a great way to cap off what was a practically 5,500 feet vertical gain in right about 4 miles. I would say that we had near perfect conditions that day. The snow was never really that steep. It was solid, had good traction while also not being really icy. It was fairly busy. There were a lot of people who had summited. Unfortunately, you never do stay on the summit for all that long. You soak it in a little bit, take some pictures, and then you're on your way. But a good summit will just ingrain itself into your mind. And of course, there's lots of stuff still ahead of you. And the down climb can usually be quite a bit demoralizing. But the best thing you can ask for is a sweet glissade, where effectively you sit down and use your ice axe as speed control as you just kind of sled down. It's very important to remember to remove your crampons during that time because they can catch and cause serious ankle or knee damage. So never glissade with your crampons on. But if the conditions are right, it can make the descent a heck of a lot more fun and quite a bit faster. We must have made it down to the car right around 1 o'clock, 12 hours from when we woke up. But at that point, you can relax. You can bask in the success and the joy of experiencing something outdoors, something that's really cool that not that many people see. Now, to give some final thoughts, I don't necessarily think we were out of our league with this climb, but I do think there was a little bit of youthful overconfidence with it. I think we didn't have quite enough practice with all of our gear. We didn't have that much experience, clearly, with the way we dressed and our rope work. There were definitely some things that needed to get dialed in. I'm very happy that it turned out the way it did. Nobody got hurt. We didn't really even have any close calls. I would say it was a 100% successful climb based on what we could ask for and really set the stage for us to be able to step it up a little bit more in the subsequent years. I love Mount Hood. Like I said earlier, I think it's one of the most beautiful mountains in the world. It's got this perfect quality to it, and it would be a great climb for any aspiring mountaineer, whether it's your first climb or you've done quite a bit of climbing. It's just one you have to be careful about. It's not one to be taken lightly. It can be great conditions, as we saw, or it can be an absolute nightmare, and you have to be ready for all types of things and treat it as the serious climb that it is. There's a reason why it's consistently one of the most dangerous mountains in America based on fatalities. But at this point in 2018, we were absolutely stoked about our new experience and had a surge of confidence to expand further, take the hobby to new levels. Next, we would head abroad to take on a giant that would take us to heights that we'd never been before.